we're going to pay for 95% or 90, whatever the percent. You just pay a little bit, and so I mean I think nullification would be a brave and bold political act of our state leaders. I don't see that across the nation as I look at who we elect to statewide office.
No, I don't. I agree with Matt. I don't see nullification happening. Mostly, yeah. Eventually, you got to end up having a respect for your federal government. And what you can do though is take the message from states like California and Washington and Colorado, and you have to have somebody that's going to be willing to go to DC and actually address the issues that are at hand. Those states do want those laws changed, and then you have to look at the feedback from the rest of the country. Do those laws need to be changed? Something needs to be happening at the federal level, and right now when it comes to marijuana laws, you're going to need action from the federal government. You're either going to have to enforce the law and have somebody like Janet Reno show up with her tanks and start arresting people, or the federal law is going to have to be changed. But something needs to be done, and you have to have people in DC that are willing to address the issues of the day.
Yes, I think states have the right to nullify. We have never carried through a nullification act in this country to its logical conclusion. The 9th and 10th Amendments provide the states the authority to exercise their rights, to sue, to do these things. Other actions are taken on the part of the state legislatures and then force the federal government to come and pursue and sue back to the states. Those things are in place. The best remedy for nullification and to keep states from having to nullify is make sure that the laws that we passed are constitutional in the first place. I happen to be a federalism guy. I wrote my dissertation on federalism. I know a little bit about this. And I think that there's something that we probably ought to be able to do, and that's do what Fred Thompson had introduced in every year he was in the United States Senate. And that was an amendment to come to the floor, ask the rules of the Senate to be that the constitutionality of a law must be established before it's allowed to be voted on the floor of the Senate. If we were to do that, I think then we would save a lot of the grief and a lot of the cost of court cases, because I do think the states have the absolute right to object to and throw back laws that are not appropriate for those states. The states know best what's best for the people in the states, and the 9th and 10th Amendments give them the authority to do that.
All right, moving on along to question number 5. We're just past tax day. In 1913, the 16th Amendment gave Americans an income tax. Do you support the repeal of the income tax? What can we do to lower the tax burden on Americans?
Thank you so much for asking that. Yesterday I had the pleasure of sitting in front of the Des Moines Register editorial board, and I had one of the reporters ask me why I was dressed all in black. And I said I dress in black every April 15th as my small form of protest against the 16th Amendment. Yes, I think the 16th Amendment ought to be repealed, and if we repeal the 16th Amendment, we get rid of the IRS. And this has long-term ramifications. I am a fair tax guy. I believe in a fair tax, a national sales tax, with all the structures that are appropriate to that. The reason I am for a fair tax and a national sales tax is because if we get rid of the IRS, we will then preserve the First Amendment of the Constitution. And you're asking yourself why. The First Amendment of the Constitution ensures that we will have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to draw grievances, because if we take the IRS out of the system, we no longer have the coercive power of the federal government with the ability to come in and take tax-exempt status from our situations, pull our preachers, our priests, and our rabbis from the pulpits. This is why we must get rid of the 16th Amendment. The fair tax is the way to go.
I could agree with getting rid of the 16th Amendment, and I could agree with getting rid of the IRS if there was something plausible in place for collecting taxes and being able to pay our bills. I do have a couple of problems with the fair tax. I do think it's a great idea. However, There are a couple things that I have a problem with and I need to have answered before supporting a fair tax. First one would be what to do with the current assets that people have, whether it's $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million. You eliminate the IRS and then you implement a fair tax overnight. Those people, when they go to spend that money, are going to be taxed once again. They're going to basically incur a double tax on money that's already been taxed. So there's a few things that I'd like to see worked out. Overall, though, our tax code does need to be made simpler, and we do need to close loopholes. But you got to figure, anytime there's a loophole, why is there a loophole? Who's the special interest? What are they benefiting, and what's the true benefit of it?
Our tax code, some of you may have heard me say this before, our tax code has about 5 times the number of words as the Bible, and none of the good news. I would support a fair tax under one condition, and that is you guarantee me that the federal government doesn't have just another vein to tap into and tax you more. Because this federal government, throughout the course of our nation's history, has always and continued to ask for more. You know, today, at a federal, state, and local level, our tax burden is the highest it's ever been in our nation's history. And a national sales tax is a good idea. Some of the details are really going to have to be worked out. The closer it is to 15% versus 30%, that makes a huge difference in my mind. I'm concerned as you approach 30% or even more on a sales tax that you would encourage black markets and those types of things. But you know, as with anything, some of the devil's in the details. But you know, it's a good idea, and I would agree this IRS is lawless, and they need to be put out of business, and we need a better system that works. I think a tax. I support fundamental tax reform, and the only bad idea is an idea that doesn't make it simpler, fairer, and flatter. It's my turn again?
It is your turn again.
I got second time. How much time did I say?
All right, question number 6. What role do you believe the United States government has when it comes to support and funding to other countries? Do you believe American tax dollars should be invested in more foreign aid, less, or about the same?
Well, I think we should stop giving foreign aid to countries that don't like us very much, countries like Egypt. I've also been fairly outspoken on our aid to the UN. We give about $4 billion of your tax dollars to the United Nations, which I don't think helps us very much. They pass things like the Convention on Small Arms and the UN Convention on the Child and Agenda 21. And I mean, it's just really radical that are ideas that are inconsistent with American liberty and freedom. And so I would like to see less foreign aid. I would like to see less involvement of our nation's military across the globe. And those are a couple things that I believe. Fundamentally, we have to remember that every dollar we take and give to somebody else is a dollar we've had to take from a family. And it's a dollar that they can't go out to dinner with. It's a dollar that they can't hire a new employee for a small business, can't buy a new piece of equipment. And I think we need to be much more careful with every dollar we take from taxpayers because ultimately that's affecting everyone's lives and it's taking it away from families that need it the most.
I agree. The biggest thing we have to consider when looking at foreign aid is who are we giving it to and why are we giving it to them? Do they like us? What's their feelings towards us? The other thing is we must consider and we must figure out before we ever give a dollar of foreign aid is how to hold that money accountable and how to hold those supplies accountable. I encourage you to visit with people from countries that have received our foreign aid or received any products of ours to their country. I did this a couple weeks ago and I was caught completely flat-footed when the young man was explaining to me the foreign aid that we were providing his country was ending up on supermarket shelves and it was not making it to the right people. So if we're spending money to help out people of a country and it's not actually helping them out or it's only helping out a small group, then we need to rein in that money and stop spending it. The biggest thing we need when it comes to foreign aid is accountability.
$48 billion a year goes out in foreign aid, $17 billion in military sales, and $31 billion in economic support. Most of that money goes to countries that don't like us, and I think we ought to stop giving it to countries that don't like us. I have a little experience with this. I was a legitimized government gun runner back in the 1990s. I sold military equipment. I sold ships, helicopters, rocket missile systems, rifles, ammunition, computer chips, everything you can imagine. And I sold it to countries that needed it and countries that are friends of ours today. That, to me, was a great investment. And we ought to have those investments that go into countries that support us and will support us in the United Nations. One of the most corrupt organizations I ever dealt with was the United Nations. I have never seen an organization more corrupt in my life, and I dealt with them on a daily basis. This is one of the reasons that we oftentimes lose track of our economic support that we give to countries, because most of that economic support gets funneled into UN programs, or, as Scott suggests, ends up on the supermarket shelves or in the black market. I think the economic aid probably needs to go only to the countries that really need it and countries that will support us in the United Nations. Otherwise, we shouldn't give a damn nickel to anybody. Sorry about that.
All right, I'm going to make a small switch here and ask that Scott Shaven answer this question first. The question is this: what role should the government play in the definition of marriage? If two gay individuals consider themselves as partners, how would you define that, and what should the definition of marriage be?
I don't think the government should be defining marriage. I think marriage is a religious institution that needs to be worked out between two people and their church. I don't think the government should be involved with marriage. If you look at it, a marriage license is essentially a tax on a religious sacrament. For myself, I want the government as far out of my church as possible. If they're going to start getting involved with one sacrament, what's to stop them from getting involved in a second sacrament? I understand the need to have an orderly society, but the fact of the matter is, when you start blending in religious sacraments and contract law, you get into a gray area, and what's next? I'd like to have the government as far out of marriage as possible. Thank you.
I believe marriage is between a man and a woman. I believe that currently the Constitution does not address marriage, and so it's an issue that is reserved to the states under the 10th Amendment. And I believe the only way we can change that is to amend the Constitution to define marriage as between a man and a woman.
I think that I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, because I don't think the issue that we're talking about here is really an issue of marriage. It is about individuals, a very small minority of the people in this country, that want to achieve equal protection under the 14th Amendment, and thus, again, turning ourselves against this is an attack on religion that we have. People that decide to live together can do so contractually. I could care less how that's done. But one, I'm a Catholic. I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, and I don't think anyone should ask me to defy my faith to accept perhaps a social standard that might be invoked. I can't do that individually, and so I please ask not to be asked to do that. I think this is about the extension of 14th Amendment protections to people that choose to behave in a particular way, as opposed to people who have primary characteristics like disabilities, age, skin color, gender, military service, or religion that are protected classes under the 14th Amendment. And I don't think we need to establish a protected class based on behavior.
All right, next question. Do you believe the war on drugs is working or not working? Are there any changes you would make, and what are your feelings on the use of medical marijuana as prescribed to patients by licensed doctors?
Great of you to ask. One of the conversations that I have been involved in, and with many of the people in this room, by the way, since we started this campaign, has been in taking a hard look at the reclassification of marijuana at the federal level and taking it off of the Class 1 list. And then once we move it off the Class 1 list as a drug, then marijuana becomes handled differently, not only through a civil action, but also through the court system. This is a remarkable thing. Medical marijuana is another area that is emerging, and I would be able to support the use of the advancement of medical marijuana as long as the evidence continues to accumulate that medical marijuana is a valued and valuable medical treatment. We see this already, and this is, by the way, is one of the conditions for taking marijuana off of a Class 1 substance. That's one of the criteria, and I would support that going forward. Again, this is an area where I think the states have an opportunity to exercise the 9th and 10th Amendment.
To answer your first question, the war on drugs is not working. Regarding medical marijuana, this goes back to one of the first questions we were asked regarding nullification. And marijuana is a prime example of something that, of the state sending a message to the federal government to change itself. I would be all in favor of reclassifying marijuana from a Schedule I narcotic to at least a Schedule II. And that's what the states are telling. And for those of you that don't understand this, a Schedule I, the difference between a Schedule II and a Schedule I narcotic, all Schedule I narcotics are illegal federally. Classifying marijuana as the same level as heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine, but yet, and in turn making it labeling it a harsher drug than morphine or Valium, shows that some people don't understand drugs. And when you're getting the pushback from the states, it is something that needs, the reclassification is something that definitely needs to be looked at. But it has to be done with science, so too. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can ramble forever.
I have a friend, and some of you may have met her, but Marie LaFrance, who's been an outspoken advocate on behalf of her son. A son who I've met, they've been at my house, who has a severe seizure disorder and is medically fragile. And it is believed by Maria that medical marijuana, or at least a derivative, would help her son change his entire life, make him a little bit better, a little bit more normal, like my son. And I know Mayor Steve Garrett from West Des Moines has a daughter, and he's been an outspoken advocate for the same thing. And I look at how unresponsive our elected officials have been to their plight, and pretty much told them, you know what, move out of state. If you want to take care of your kid, sell all your assets, sell your rental property, sell your business, move out of the state of Iowa. That's the solution right now from our elected officials in the state of Iowa. It's not good enough. We need to be more compassionate, and if there are things that maybe are a little taboo that could help those kids that are afflicted with severe seizure disorders, then we should do what's right and not play politics with this issue.
All right, question number 9. The National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, allows that the government can detain citizens without trial if they are suspected of terrorism. Is the infinite detention provision in the NDAA necessary to national security? If so, is it a violation of the Fifth Amendment? And where do you stand on the line between security and freedom?
Well, I stand on the side of freedom, but at the same time, I look at the Constitution as trumping any bill or law that's passed by our Congress. The Fifth Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and all of our rights and liberties protected by the Constitution can't be overcome by an act of Congress. This Constitution is beautiful because it was created by people suspicious of government, that had been offended by their sovereign, by their king, and they said never again, and so they put these rights and protections in place. And so, you know, if the bill allows United States citizens to be detained without their constitutional rights and violates those, then I would say it's a violation of our rights. You know, if we lose our Constitution, we lose everything. You know, I'm gravely concerned about this president. I'm gravely concerned about the NSA and its spying on its citizens. And if we are starting to put people in prison without due process and without probable cause and without all of the protections we have, then we have crossed the Rubicon, and we should be gravely concerned about that. And so, for me, the Constitution is the ultimate arbiter of any of these kind of issues, and it can't be overcome no matter how much Congress wants to try to pretend to protect our citizens.
I agree, the Constitution is there to protect us. Some of you guys have heard me talk about being nostalgic. I often think about colonial times, what our forefathers would do. And here we are sitting in a classroom. They didn't have too many universities to have candidate forums 200 years ago. But you think about, though, what would our forefathers think if we told them, well, you know what, we're kind of afraid that you might be on the side of the British, so we're going to detain you for a little bit. No, they wouldn't stand for that. That's why we have a Constitution. That's why you're guaranteed due process. That's why you're guaranteed a speedy trial. Indefinite detention on suspicion is wrong. Thank you.
I agree with my colleagues up here. The National Defense Authorization Act contains issues that violate the 4th and 5th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution and therefore should be struck down. You must remember back in history, 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts, there were 4 acts that were passed that were there. You could be jailed for speaking against the government. Imagine if those Alien and Sedition Acts were in place today. I think they are. I think we're very close to that very same element here. And had it not been for Thomas Jefferson and the Supreme Court of the United States to strike, and the Congress, the Republican Congress, to strike down those laws, we probably would have had a legacy that we would regret still today. I want you all to understand, I nearly lost my job when the Patriot Act was first brought forward. I fought inside the Department of Homeland Security against the Patriot Act because I felt that the Patriot Act would be abused. We would violate the 4th and 5th Amendments, and we have. And I hate saying I told you so. I kept my job. But I think you just need to understand there are people out there that understand this and will fight courageously to protect American citizens.
All right, I'm going to have Mr. Shaven answer this question first again. Almost every estimate says the Social Security system will not be around for younger people come 40 or 50 years from now. Should young people be able to opt out of Social Security? What would you do to assure young people that the system will still be there for them?
It's a great question and very astute observation. Yes, Social Security is going broke. Most people my age and younger already understand that. Should people be able to opt